Okie dokie then. So welcome to this Connected for Success training webinar that's introducing values for peak performance. And this training will benefit organisations, executive leaders, team leaders and managers, HR professionals, learning development specialists, individuals who want to improve their performance levels. And before we get started, I just want to let you all know that this is officially being recorded.
So firstly, I'd like to introduce myself and Solutions 42. I'm Becky Hill and I will be hosting this session today. I create leaders in their field, helping people and organisations find ways to be more productive. I have a foundation in science. I've worked for 25 years in the public and corporate sector, and now I'm the founder and CEO of Solutions 42 Limited. I come to you today certified as a Barrett Value Centre consultant, colour code personality science trainer, a Canfield training group trainer in the success principles and Canfield methodology. I've also got a level 3 national award qualification for adult education and training. So this is my love. It's my passion. I love training and sharing stuff with loads of people.
I am supported today by my friend and colleague, Dr. Wendy Hardman, who you will have probably already seen in the chat is making contact with you. Wendy is a learning and development specialist, and she particularly is very instrumental in online learning. So I'm very grateful for Wendy's support here today. Thank you, Wendy, for being here for me.
You're very welcome.
Before we start, I just want to go over what to expect and how this webinar is going to work. So please have a pen and paper and page 4 of your personal values assessment. A download or a printed version of your handouts, which were both of these things were links in the original invite email in which you've managed to get into on the Zoom account. So I'm hoping you've seen those at the bottom. If you haven't had the chance to actually check out your personal values assessment, there is a link in the chat box here, and it's worth doing it now because it will take less than 5 minutes and it will give you some context as to what I'm going to be going through. And just to confirm, this is going to be recorded. You will receive a link to the recording if you'd like to review and reflect, because there is going to be quite a lot of information to take in over this short time. I do anticipate that this webinar will take between 60 and 90 minutes, and that depends on whether there's many questions that come from the floor. And I'll be going through some slides first, and at the end we'll go live for further questions. But as I'm going through the training, if there are some questions or query pops up for you, then do use the chat box to note it, and Wendy will make sure it gets answered and brings it up to my attention. As well as the link to the PVA, you should also have had this link to the 3 handouts that look like this, and I'll be referring to them as we go along. So what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be covering an overview of values and what they are. We're going to explore the personal values assessment and how to read it. We're going to take a peek at some of the other values-based diagnostic assessments that make up the toolkit called Cultural Transformation Tools, or CTT for short. And we're going to see how some of these are used in mapping out where to begin your focus on performance improvements in relationships or organisations. We're going to dive a little bit deeper, looking at the difference between the personal values assessment that you've done and what else can be seen with the other tools. And then I'm going to wrap it all up and open up the floor to answer any of those questions. So before we jump in, I'd like to provide some context around 3 key concepts and the words that we're going to be hearing throughout this training. And these are values, culture, and consciousness. So what are values? Well, as with all words, there are many definitions in the dictionary, and the phrase that I like most, which was said by one of my teachers, Kathleen Seeley, is that values are beliefs with a punch. You know when you've actually bumped up against a value, when you're either particularly triggered by something or you're feeling inspired. So beliefs hold us back while values pull us forward and unite us. So for example, you can have a room full of clergy from different faiths and they will almost never agree on their beliefs. But when you actually start to talk values and discuss their meaning, it is possible to come to an agreement. So beliefs will divide us, the values will unite us. So values are the ideals that give significance to our lives, that are reflected through the priorities that we choose and that we act on consistently and repeatedly. Values basically show up in our behaviours more than our words. And values are identifiable, measurable, and are experienced through our feelings and imagination. We aspire to live into our values. Values can be positive or potentially limiting. Positive values enable us to live authentically and contribute to the common good. And when we let our positive values drive our decision making, we build connection, we enable bonding, and it creates loyalty and trust. But potentially limiting values can get in our way and they can block progress. They arise from fears and anxieties that we have about not being able to meet our needs. And when we let our potentially limiting values drive our decision making, we create separation, doubt, and mistrust. So values are a concept, and the context in which values are played out comes from the beliefs we hold and the behaviours that we express. It is what can create the sticky situations or the very collaborative ones. Values are universal. So for example, the value of family is cross-cultural around the world. However, my belief around what family is and my behaviours in action around that family value may be very different between you, me, and others. So the next up word that we're going to explore is culture, and this is very applicable to organisations and groups. Richard Barrett defines it as it's the way things are done around here. And the culture of an organisation or any group of individuals is a reflection of the values. Oops, I pressed that too quickly. I thought I did. This is what the love of live TV is. Stay still. Yes, so the culture of any organisation or any group of individuals is a reflection of the values, beliefs and behaviours of leaders of the group and the legacy of past leaders. So what is happening at the front line is a reflection of what is happening at the top. If there is a slight crack in the leadership team, there will be a chasm at ground level. And later we'll sort of take a look at this and how we can measure the gaps. And I just put that, it's not when I say organisation, it's not just company groups, this can be teams of people. It could, even if we play this out in our home lives, it's, you think about it, parents, we're leaders, our children are on the ground force. If something's not right in our world, we will have that reflected back to us in our children's world. So organisations can actually mean quite a wide thing. So when we look at culture, there are a number of metaphors that can be used, but I actually quite like the metaphor of nature and the tree. So culture is what is under the ground, the roots, and healthy roots determine the health of the tree above the ground and the abundance of the fruit. So culture is what we can't see, but we can feel it. It is what we do at the roots that actually determines the outcomes and the output. So over time, with organisational development, individual development, team development, yours and my development, things change. Like the seasons. We prune, we provide nutrients, and then we repot, and eventually new growth appears. And so we nurture the roots so that we can adapt through the changes and thrive. That's what culture is. And lastly, the next word I want to provide context for is consciousness. Consciousness is also known as the level of development of awareness. But for the purposes of today, it's defined as awareness with a purpose, and it means to attain, maintain, or enhance internal stability and external equilibrium. What does that mean? Well, it means to survive, to find a status quo, a balance in our internal and our external worlds. So now to the model that we'll be using to look at the values. The model was created by Richard Barrett, who observed organizations and culture transformation, and he was the one that designed the cultural transformation tools, the CTT tools for short. Now, Richard is in his 70s now, but he started life out as an engineer and he worked for the World Bank in transportation. And around about his 40s, he started to notice he was bored and he began seeking answers. And this led him to tune into the passions that he'd been reading and following all of his life, which centered around people and human potential. So through his research, he designed the cultural transformation tools and he founded the Barrett Values Centre. And for the last 35 years, his tools have been used across a wide spread of different organisations, market and countries. So what do cultural transformation tools measure? Well, they measure, individual, leadership, team, organisation and national consciousness. So the roots of this consciousness model are laid in the foundation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for those unaware of this model, Maslow was a humanistic psychologist who is best known for creating Maslow's hierarchy of needs. His theory is based on the belief that every person has a strong desire to realize their full potential and is not, as Sigmund Freud postulated, simply blindly reacting to external situations, which either makes us a person happy or messes them up. Maslow's hierarchy basically describes levels of ascending needs required to be met for psychological health and well-being. And as we build the foundation of these needs, we build self-esteem, and ultimately we then move into what's called self-actualization, which is at the top of the pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid in red and orange are the needs that are called deficiency needs. And when we meet these needs, we gain no lasting satisfaction. But if we haven't met these needs, we feel a sense of anxiety. So for example, physiological needs would be the physical needs of food, water, air, and the things that help us to survive. And we need to feel safe and secure when we're eating, drinking and sleeping, which is linked to the sense of love and belonging, and the combination of these all contribute to our self-esteem and our self-concept. And if you wanted to take that into an organizational level, it might be, the company pays staff member a certain amount of money. Initially, the staff member is happy, but after a while, they want something more. So the organization has satisfied the physiological need for a while, but it didn't actually engage the staff member to be more committed or motivated to do their work. For that to happen, the staff member has to actually feel satisfied in all their levels to be at a point of self-awareness. But once we've built the foundation, which typically happens by our mid-30s, we then move into self-actualization and our growth needs, which are here in green. So now when our growth needs are fulfilled, they actually never go away. They create the deeper sense of purpose, motivation, and commitment. So Richard didn't actually add anything to developmental psychology, but what he did do was identify the values that were present in every level of Maslow's needs, and he expanded the concept of self-actualization into 3 additional levels. So Richard identified 7 levels of consciousness development. And that was his contribution to the world. So how this has morphed into his work is that he's identified values at every stage of psychological development. he noticed that the values choices can give an indication of what stage of psychological development an individual or the team or an organisation are operating at. His model then helps to identify the basic needs and the growth needs. And then it helps us to see where we actually are now and what might be holding ourselves back individually and organisationally. So let's sort of have a look at the first of your handouts, handout 1, if you have that available. So in this handout, what you can see are values meanings. These are values underneath these actual meanings here, mapped against each of the levels 1 to 7. And they are in these different areas of personal, organisational and community and society levels of consciousness. So and where the values words are mapped, they reflect these areas across the board. So there's quite a lot of information in that, I appreciate. But it's useful to have that when we're looking at some of the other items that we'll go through. So if we remember, at any given moment in time, our values are a reflection of our unmet basic needs and the growth needs that are associated with the stage of psychological development we've reached. Your survey has identified where you are now in relation to your stage of life and the needs that you want to be met. So let's just have a little bit of recap over that. Level 1 and 3 are all about satisfying your basic needs for survival, safety, love and belonging, and your self-concept and esteem. So that's level 1, as essentially in short term, health, safety and money. Level 2 is about satisfying our emotional need for belonging, which is about relationships and community. And level 3 is about satisfying our emotional need for being recognised for skills, talents and knowledge that we have. And it's important to note that levels 1, 2 and 3 are basic needs. They are measured in the context and culture of our upbringing. So the way we are raised and the environment in which we are raised defines levels 1, 2 and 3 for us. And then at some stage in our lives, usually around about our 30s, we begin to question that upbringing, our culture and the environment, which leads to what's called individuation, which is level 4, and our desire for autonomy, freedom, independence and adventure. This is more than just the teenage rebellion that we usually see around about levels 2 and 3. The question that pops up here is, who am I in all of this? And this is when we begin to move into transformation, satisfying our growth needs of levels 5, 6 and 7. So level 5 is about finding meaning, having a purpose and being authentic, basically living life on our terms. And then level 6 and 7 are about satisfying and beginning to actualize on our purpose. And it's all about being a service through influencing and impacting the world around us. And then by the time we get to level 7, it's generally, we're beginning to think about this in our mid-50s and onwards, about satisfying the need to leave a legacy. And this is the desire where we want to have lived a life of significance that feels fulfilled and will be remembered. So this is the evolution of consciousness. And how quickly or slowly we move into and through the transformation stages always depends on how well our basic needs are being met. And we do have primary and secondary motivators, and I'm not really going to go into too much today because that'll just take a bit too much time. But other than say that our primary motivators are the needs of the stage of development. So these are all your stages of development, and our primary motivators are the stages of development that we are in at that life. And our secondary motivators are about meeting our basic needs down here in levels 1, 2 and 3. And our secondary motivators will always predominate over our primary ones. So in essence, we grow in stages. We operate at all of these different levels at different times of our life, and we operate in different worldviews due to our upbringing and our culture. So if you continue to unpack that model further, and you'll notice over here psychological stages of development, and all the titles have got the psychological stages. Levels 1, 2 and 3 are about personal mastery. So once we've got these 3 stages basically satisfied to some degree, we will then move into level 4, the transformation stage, which is also called the individuating stage. And this, as I said, is about beginning to ask that question: what is my life all about? Where do I want to be? And as I said before, it occurs around our late 20s to our mid 30s, and then we move into level 5 to get internal cohesion, where we're asking and identify who I am in the world. And then into level 6, external cohesion. How am I going to serve or connect with the outside world? So levels 1, 2 and 3, we are living our lives reacting to the outside world according to the conditions of our environment and the people around us. We are often unaware of our values and how they play out in our decisions, feelings, actions, and the impact we are having on ourselves and others in our world. And as we move into the upper levels with self-awareness, we begin to make choices and decisions with consciousness as to why we've made them. We begin to live our life from the inside out, choosing to respond rather than react as we come aligned with our personal values. So remember, I talked about potentially limiting values. The only place that they show up is in levels 1, 2 and 3. Well, if you refer to any of your handouts, and this one happens to be handout 2, you'll see value words in red. Under each of the levels, you'll see values words in red. And these words have been identified as potentially limiting. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are limiting at this point, but if they go unchecked and unquestioned, they can be limiting for you, because if you recall earlier on, your values are a reflection of your beliefs, which are played out in behaviors. So for example, if I value power and I believe it makes me get noticed, I might feel and think I'm satisfying the basic need to be recognized. But if I behave in an aggressive manner, then it will impact my level 2 basic need to feel connection and build relationships, which could hold me back from building healthy connections in the future and as I get older. So if potentially limiting values or our fears only show up in levels 1, 2 and 3, what are those fears grounded around? Well, level 1 is grounded around, do I have enough? Level 2 is, am I loved enough? And level 3 is, am I enough? So in our own learning, or if we're coaching others, then this is where the work is. This levels 1, 2 and 3 is where the work is. And this is where better improvements can be made to manage a group, a team, or individual performance. So now it's time to have a look at your page 4 of your personal values assessment and see what's going on for you right now. And I'm just going to check in the chat box here as well, because I see that there's some things, and forgive me for Lorraine, thank you for your question. You asked me about the difference between primary and secondary motivators. So let's go through the survey, and I shall bring that up again. So you should be looking at something like this, which is a chart called a dot plot. And the first thing that I want you to notice is that the value words that you have chosen are in alphabetical order rather than any other order of preference. And secondly, against each of the words, there is a number, and that number represents the level of consciousness that the value sits in at the moment. So notice those two things. And next thing I want you to notice is, are there any white dots? Are there any white dots? Because these signify potentially limiting values, and the word will show up with an L next to it. And remember that potentially limiting doesn't actually mean that they are limiting you right now, this moment, but they can if they go unchecked. And the next thing to notice as well is, are there any empty levels in 1, 2, or 3? I'll go through some examples in a moment, so don't worry about remembering all the notes, but for the moment, simply notice, are there any empty levels in 1, 2, or 3 for you? And if there are, it means one of two things. Either they are handled or they are blind spots. And finally, are there any gaps in levels 5, 6, and 7? Gaps at this level relate to the next step of growth for you. Though it is possible to have gaps in these levels, it doesn't mean they are blind spots or things to handle. You can already be doing a lot of your work at this level and comfortable with it. But just notice if there are any gaps there. So, when you're looking at your dot plot, where is the concentration of most of your dots? So in this one, the concentration of most of the dots are at the top, in the top 5 and 6, levels 5 and 6, this is where most of the concentration. Where there is most concentration of your dots signifies where your energy is right now. So this actually happens to be my dot plot that I share with you. And so this would probably be quite a good one to go through, Lorraine, with regards to potentially primary and secondary motivators. So I'm 52 years old and I'm in the developmental stage of 5, 6 and 7, making, living my life from the inside out. I've identified what my purpose is, I've identified what I feel connected to, and I'm now trying to move into the stage of making that happen in the world. So I'm actually in this level of consciousness up here. However, you notice that I have 2 areas in the levels 1, 2 and 3 that are empty. And now what did I say before? I said that these are either handled or these are blind spots. And when I first took on values assignment, this bottom level here was empty. And this all made total sense to me. In fact, all of these 3 levels make total sense to me because 3 years ago, I went through a divorce. So where I had a solid base of my secondary motivators, Lorraine, so secondary motivators are my basic needs. These are the ones that I need to be met. So have I got enough? Am I loved enough? And am I good enough? These are the secondary motivators that are driving where my activity and where my work would go now. So what's important for me to know is, have I got these handled or am I missing something? Is there a blind spot? And interestingly, through doing this work and becoming aware and becoming conscious, I want to be working up at this level, but I'm actually operating down at these 2 levels because right now I'm rebuilding, recognizing that I need connection with other people. I need connection socially, and so therefore I've been making more contact with people out in the world, both on a social and a professional basis, because I need that need met. Now, I would have just done that before without really realizing why I'm doing it, but now I'm conscious about it. This is there, and this drives my primary. So these are my primary motivators at the top here. This is what I really want to be doing on a fantastic day when everything's going really well. The kids going to school on time, the car's working brilliantly, it's sunshine outside, I'm feeling on song, it's brilliant. That's where I want to be. That would be where my primary motivators are, but my secondary motivators are driving me right now. And it's good to be conscious and aware that these things will always take over down here to help you move into this growth area up there. So I hope that sort of makes a bit more sense for you, Lorraine. So this is where you need this is where these things come together, because you can see where your energy is, but you can also start asking your question, you know, what is it that, am I being blind about something, or have I handled this? I'm perfectly happy, you know, with my finances, my relationships, and, you know, yeah, I feel pretty good about myself. Because these three all stack up together. And then the other thing that you can look at down here is your words, because the words tell you an awful lot about what it is that you value. So let's just move on. Oh, I can't move the thingy out of the way. I love technology. Right, so here's another example of a PVA from a young person who's 22 years of age. Obviously, confidential, I'm not letting you, you know, I'm not tell you who the name of this person is, but they're 22 years of age. So it's not surprising that there is a concentration of energy in the lower three levels. It's not surprising at all. So remembering that this model is grounded in development psychology, we grow in stages, we're operating at different levels, and we're living in different worldviews. So this person is building their foundation. So notice the white dots. Notice the white dots that are here. And you can learn an awful lot from the word choices, but remember that we each define these words differently. So the art is in the dialogue and the discussion that you have with the person. So the key question really to be asking is, what do these words mean to you? So looking at the plot, and we can see here being liked is a level 2 consciousness, and it's a potentially a limiting value. But they also have ambition and power at level 3. So it's possible that these could conflict with each other. The value of being liked might actually get in the way of ambition, whilst the value of power could be an indicator for the drive for ambition or a desire for supremacy and control at any expense, which could potentially conflict again with being liked. So this person might be balancing these two, you know, ambition and being liked. And now that they've done this survey, they can become conscious and recognize when it's appropriate or not appropriate to exhibit the different behaviors. And so we look at caution as well, which is a just under being liked. If we look at caution, and it's a level 1 value, and that might bump up against ambition, because if they're overly cautious, they might not be willing to take risks and put themselves forward. So this is just a scenario, and I'm hypothesizing here what might be going on to help you understand. But the key to getting the real story behind these values is in facilitating the dialogue, asking the person to tell us their story. And when we get people talking about their values, it opens up a really rich, juicy content leading to these transformational conversations. So, for example, in my coaching conversation, I would be asking this person, how does this value of control impact on your value of being liked? So the next thing I'd just like to show you is how these play together in organizations and relationships. So here's my profile again, and this is the profile of the younger member of staff, and immediately you can see that we are at different levels. Most of my energy is in the upper levels, while most of theirs is in the lower levels. And without us being aware and recognizing the different stages that we're in, we could have some conflict. So this is why, you know, when you go into an organization, a team or group, and you've got, you know, different age groups in there, that we sometimes get conflict because people are not really aware of the stage of development that they're at. And so in this case, the other person could see me as someone who's pie in the sky, a know-it-all, trying to control them. Because, for example, I have level 4 and level 5 values about clarity and continuous learning. So therefore, I ask a lot of questions to understand and to learn. And this might be construed as interrogation and trying to take control, which might knock up against the other person's value of control and independence. And then again, I have a level 7 value of ease with uncertainty. So I'm less concerned about being cautious, and I'm more willing to just try something and see how it works. And the other person might actually need more answers because of where they are in their development stage. They haven't got as much life experience. So it's through the dialogue, and it's through recognizing where we each are in our different stages of development, that I can actually meet where the other person is, and by me explaining what my values mean to me, the other person can then see where I'm coming from, and where and I can see where they're basically coming from. So it really is a rich dialogue that can result in teams, individuals, couples, families, and so on and so forth, building better, more productive relationships. And I'd like to ask you just to try this out at home. Get your partner or a family member or a friend, ask them to do the PBA and just see what comes up in the dialogue. I absolutely guarantee that you'll discover something that you weren't aware of before. So how do we build on values to enhance performance and productivity? So in this next section, the focus is on how these values play out in organizations and groups. And I may lose you a little bit as I delve a bit deeper, but I just want to show you how this works on a bigger scale. And you may actually see yourself or recognize others in your place of work through what I'm about to explain. And in this section, you might want to refer to handout 3, which shows you the organizational values which have been mapped against the levels of consciousness. So slightly different descriptors, but they're still mapping against the 7 levels of consciousness. It's just that this is about organizational consciousness, whereas the ones that we looked at previously was about your personal consciousness. Now, in any organizational structure, whether that's profit, non-profit, a public service, corporate, small, medium enterprise, education established, anything, you get the idea. Essentially, any environment which is providing a service of some sort, there is a requirement for structure, and that structure usually comes in the form of systems and processes which have been developed to maintain and deliver consistent outputs. So outputs are the things that are often measures of what's happened in the past. They're the history. So they might be the sales made, the widgets manufactured, the profits made, the exam results attained, the number of sports matches won, the number of patients treated, the number of potential customers contacted, and so on and so forth. And we can measure these by the day, the week, the month, last year. These are all outputs and all outcomes, and they are really easy to see and easy to measure. And if you go back to the tree metaphor, they're basically the branches, twigs, leaves, and the fruits of the tree above the ground. They are the visible outcomes. But what is invisible and often perceived as not measurable are the lead indicators to the outputs and outcomes, the measures of alignment or misalignment between espoused values, i.e. the written word, versus the values in action. So you think about your workplace, are the people living their values and walking their talk, or are they leaving their values at the door, showing up but not productive in what they do? And we've all been there at some point in our lives, doing a job we don't like, or working in a team that are dragging us down because all they do is moan and complain of how bad things are. Performance is low, motivation is low, morale is low, and the energy of the workplace just seems to suck the life out of you. I'm sure that we've all experienced that at some stage. If you look at these two organisations, A and B, which of these companies would you actually want to work for, and which do you feel would suck the life out of you? Perhaps you'd just like to sort of put your choice in the chat box now. So through exploring personal values, the values being experienced in the current workplace environment and the values we'd like to see and experience in the future, we begin to see what supports high performance and what undermines people from performing more effectively in their jobs. And yeah, all of you all of you put down A. So yeah. You also see another measure here, which is called cultural entropy. And cultural entropy is the percentage of unproductive energy being consumed out of fear and dysfunctional behaviours. So the lower the percentage, the healthier the organisation, the higher the percentage, the more people are working and living in fear. And the knock-on effect will be seen in performance levels. Okay, so this is about organisation, but why does that matter to me, and how does it matter, and who on earth cares? When we actually bump up against our values in our environments and the relationships we have with others, we do not feel fulfilled. And if we do not feel fulfilled, we do not feel happy. And if it continues for any length of time, we disengage and all the activities that led to performance drop. So our success drops. And in the workplace context, if we feel that the environment and our direct superior supports us in meeting our needs and the desires at the stage of psychological development, we will feel a sense of engagement with the workplace, because the workplace is essentially helping us meet our most important and most immediate needs and desires. And whilst in the reversing situation, where we feel the environment's preventing us from meeting all our needs and are not paying any attention to us, and we feel that levels 1, 2, and 3 are not being met, first of all, we feel frustrated, then we get angry, and eventually we become depressed. And if we can't see a way to get out of our needs, or we can't see our needs met, we'll eventually leave. And if we don't leave, we will become actively disengaged. And as this book title captures it so well, we basically say, I quit, but I forgot to tell you. And I'm sure you all know or have known someone in this state of mind. They're there, but they're not really there. You can even sense this with your friendship group sometimes. They're there, but they're not really there. But in a workplace context, this is quite impactful. So in the past, where it was believed that we were focusing on putting systems and processes in place and satisfying people's basic need for money, and we thought that that might make people perform better, recent studies like this Gallup report, which was published in December 2017, they're actually showing that performance and productivity are directly linked to engagement. And in the current world economy, the report states that there is a high level of disengaged workforce. Look, 67% are disengaged, plus a bit more which are actively disengaged. So we have a high level of I've quit, but I haven't actually told you yet. And I don't think that's just about the workplace. I think that's also applicable in our day-to-day life. And just to confirm the impact engagement has on productivity and performance, here is another workplace study which was done on the top 40 American companies to work for, and the red line here is the top 40 best companies to work for. The blue line is the Standard & Poor's or S&P's 500 companies that are on the US stock exchange. And just take a look at the timeline. So you can see that around about 2008, 2007, the dip in share value at that time, which was the time of the recession, notice that in these great places to work, that they did also drop as well. But however, what I want you to really pay more attention to is the recovery period of the best companies to work for. So a company that is clear on their values, that they value their people and their culture, they recover more quickly and they outperform those that don't. And just to take that a little bit deeper, still, there are two books that write about high-performing organizations. The first one was published by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and he wrote about S&P 500 companies and what makes good companies transition to great companies. And that book was shortly followed by another study that was done, and the book was called Firms of Endearment by David Wolf et al. And he reviewed how world-class companies profit from passion and purpose. And if you have a look at the S&P 500 companies, the good to great companies and the firms of endearment, you can see that over 3 years there's actually not that much difference in performance. After 5 years, firms of endearment companies are moving ahead of the others. But after 10 years, the firms of endearment companies are outperforming the others by a factor of 10 to 1. So an organization with low cultural entropy produces business results that are greater than 21% returns on asset with a small staff turnover versus the high cultural entropy organization, which will see 80% return on asset, a minus 80% return on assets and 50% or more of their staff turnover. So organizational transformation is a process, and it's a long-term project, just as life is a process, and we humans need to always be looking at our own stuff and making progress. So if culture is the new competitive advantage and engagement is the way to peak performance, how do we actually create a culture to get more engagement using the module and the values-based interventions? So first off, we align our individual values, which is why you do your PVA, because you want to come to work, I live my values at work, and if I can express 4 or more of my values at work, then I will be feeling engaged. Step 2 would be a mission and vision alignment, duties connected to purpose and feeling connected. So, the work that you do is connected to a bigger purpose and you feel connected to that. Then the personal alignment, which is walking the talk, is particularly beneficial for the leaders. And going back to what I said earlier, which is if there is an out of alignment with leadership, a small crack at the leadership level, there will be a chasm at the bottom with the workforce. So it's very important for leaders to walk their talk. And structural alignment comes about from looking at the systems and the processes and ensuring that those systems and processes are supporting the espoused values. So you've experienced the personal values assessment, which is telling you where your energy is right now in your stage of development and what you value now. And through dialogue and inquiry, you can begin to sort of unpack situations that might be creating difficulty or challenges in your lives and create greater awareness, which will then help you move forward and grow. But taking this into the workplace and other organisations, there's a number of more in-depth assessments that we can play with. I'm not going to go into the whole list, but these are some of my favourites. There's the individual values assessment, the leadership development assessment, the small group assessment, and the leadership team values assessment. And with each of these ones, these are actually customizable, so you can actually plug in the values of the organization to check out whether you are actually, your staff feel you are really going, walking your talk. And they're, of course, all supported with interpretation guides and everything. So let's just quickly have a look at the difference between your personal values assessment and the IVA. So the individual values assessment is 3 questions that are asked. So in the PVA, the same one, you are asked to select 10 values or behaviours that most reflect who you are and not who you desire to become. So that's the same as the one that you selected for your personal values assessment. But then to create a current state of analysis based on the values of the organisation, we then ask the second question, which is to select 10 values that are being experienced by yourself in the current operation of the organisation. And then the third question, which is all about possibility, is selecting 10 values or behaviours that you believe would be essential for the organisation to reach its highest potential. And that basically shows us current potential in the organisation, so the individuals and their values. So this is the current potential, where the energy is actually going in the current culture, and the dreams, the desired values are what people dream about. And then you begin to see that it's starting to create a baseline from which you can have all this dialogue. And instead of just the single dot plot, this is the individual values assessment, and so you can see there's more information that comes up with this plot, but at a high level you can see here in the first column that these are the top 10 values that are important in the lives of the individual. The second column is how the employee themselves is experiencing the current organisation, so what's working well and what's not working well. And then what the employee believes is necessary for the organisation to achieve its full potential. Let's move forward. So in this particular one, what's slightly different here is that the words are mapped, and you will notice that some are bolded in blue and others are in orange. So you can see orange and blue are bolded. So these are mapped. They're mapped across the 3 of these areas. But essentially, this helps the individual and the organisation see where they are right now and be able to map out how to get from where they are to where they want to be. So this is a starting point to getting a base level measurement of what we feel is going on at the roots, but haven't quite put our finger on the problem yet. And then we can go a little bit deeper and look at cultural values assessment. So it looks again it looks the same. However, this time it's done on a group basis, and similarly to the individual values assessment, you've got what's important to the employees on a group basis here, and then column 2 is about what the values that are being experienced by the group of employees, and 3 is what the perceived values are that are required for the organisation to reach its full potential. So from this you get a cultural entropy score, which is here, and that's calculated, and remember that this is the measure of energy that is going into unproductive work, i.e. the stuff that impacts on performance levels. So these values in the column are, these values here are the top 10 values in order that have been selected by this group. So in this case, the group size is 2,990, and the top value that they so 1,484 of that 2,990 value honesty. And in column 2, 1,690 of those 2,990 individuals chose bureaucracy in their current culture, and this is a level 3 value, and it shows us, and if you refer to the handout 3, which is the organisational level of consciousness, and looking at level 3, it shows us that systems and processes are getting in the way of productivity in this particular case. So you see a lot of white dots as well. So remembering that level 1 is about foundation, health and safety, financial stabilities. Level 2 is about relationships, and level 3 is efficiencies and productivity. So there's really a lot of work to be done here. So the entropy score is really split down into risk bands, and this is what gives you an indication of the urgency to do any transformation work. And in organisations, it should always start with the leadership, because culture is a reflection of the present leaders and the legacy of the past leaders. And as Richard says, Organisations don't transform, it's the people that do. So we've got to our 60 minutes, and to wrap up things in summary, we've reviewed what values are and how they play out in human dynamics. We've got your personal values assessment, and you can now see where your current energy is focused, and your increased awareness will most likely have given you some things to think about. The PVA is part of a much wider toolkit called the Cultural Transformation Tools, which are most comprehensive diagnostic tools available to help individuals and organisations move from where they are now to where they want to be. And you've had a taster of how they can dive deeper to identify where focus and effort is required to improve performances. So all that's left now is to thank you for your participation. I really do appreciate the time that you've given me today, and I'd now like to open up the channel for questions and answers if anybody has got any. And let me just see if I can unmute stuff. Or Wendy can help me unmute stuff. And I'm also going to go online and see if you guys can see me now. I'm not sure if you can see me. Tell me if you can see me.
Hi Becky, I can see you.
Oh hey, because I can't see anyone.
I think I switched off my video.
Oh, well, thank you very much for being here. Any questions?
I don't know if I've got any questions. I did put something on the chat just now. Sorry, this is Vicky speaking.
Hey Vicky.
Looking at one of your slides.
I'm not sure the meaning of the blue and the orange words.
Yes, I don't know if I zoned out for a second when you were talking.
So the highlight of the blue and the orange words, the blue usually stands out for where it's meeting either your individual value, something you value, and it's translating across into one of the other areas. So it's a match. It becomes a match for you're living your value over in that other area. The orange ones are showing again what's consistently going across from personal values or the individual values or leadership values through to what is currently being expressed to what you want to keep maintaining for your future. So it's usually when you've done a number of these, you just get to quickly see, you look at these dot plots very quickly and you can see, right, those are all in alignment, we're doing that right, or okay, this one's out of alignment, or you know, you can actually just see where they're matching up basically. That's what those are highlighting. It's slightly different ways. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for
that. Anyone else? Oh. How often would it make sense to do this? So the personal values assessment can be done as often as you like, really, but I find that you will get to see changes once you become aware of this stuff. If you do it every 3 to 6 months, you will see changes. You will see shifts. You'll see shifts in you'll see some commonality of your values. You'll always pick them, but because as you go through your life, you've become aware of something, so it does actually mean that you change, a different behavior happens and takes place. And it's depending on what you're trying to meet at the time. So every 3 to 6 months, the personal values one is worth doing. In terms of organizational structure, then you would be doing that in order to see a behavior change, and in order for other people to see a behavior change, it takes between 9 and 12 months. So the leadership ones and the individual values ones are what are called 360-degree tools. They're diagnostic tools. And so those ones, you are going out and you're asking other people to give you feedback so that you can see how you see yourself versus how they see you. And those changes usually take between 9 and 12 months. So that's about how often I do those. And it depends on what it is that is identified as the area that needs the intervention and needs the work on straight away. So should organisations accept personal values and work with individuals to seek cohesion, or aim to influence individuals to adopt organisations' values determined? I wonder if you would like to give me your gut instinct on that one. You cannot change another person. What you can do is you can create an environment in which they will enjoy being there. And so I think organisations should work with individuals to identify what is going to work for them and what's not going to work with them, in alignment with where the organisation and the structural systems are going. Quite often we take people on, it's during a recruitment process or a talent management process, we sometimes just we don't look in enough detail into where a person is at that stage of development. Can you imagine if you did one of these right at the beginning of a recruitment process, you would be able to see where the energy of that person is right now, what their potential fears are, and you could then have a dialogue around that and how that shows up for them. And then you can match that with your organisation, what you believe your organisation values are. But if you've already mapped your organisation values, then again, you've got something to map it against. Anything else? So identifying individual values in recruitment is key. I think it would be a good plan to use the PVA during the process, because I mean, how often do we sit there and we draw up a list of questions, but we haven't actually had the insight. We're trusting the person on the other side of the table to with our gut instinct, with a feeling about them, without actually having the things in front of us to enable us to be able to ask more pointed questions. How do they feel about X, Y, Z? And you can bring it up because you can see it on their, they've done it, they can see it, you see it. So you actually probably end up in having a sort of a mini coaching dialogue with them without realizing it. Is it legal to ask an application person to do this survey? You can invite them. You invite them to do that, and from an HR's perspective, there's plenty of HR professionals who've put processes in place where they're doing some sort of personality profiling before they take a person on board. The best way of doing it is to invite people to undertake it. So I think it's all about the way in which you do it. If it's part of the process of recruitment, then it's your process. Anything else? Well,
Becky, hi, it's Lorraine.
Oh, hi Lorraine.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really, really useful and really informative. From the examples of those best organisations to work for, do you have any examples, or can you point to ones where there is a good mix of personnel across age ranges? The reason that I ask is that I have a slight suspicion, because I see it in the place that I work in at the moment, where there's been a huge shift towards younger people, people sort of mid-20s through early 30s. That's kind of what we're recruiting right now. And if you look again at the dot plot, maybe it is easier for organisations to hit those kind of points around, remuneration and those sorts of things, rather than doing the self-actualising piece. So if you've got a very young organisation and you're remunerating very well, then I guess you would score quite well against this in terms of meeting, the overall values. But if you have a broad range, 25 through 55, 65, 70-year-olds, I'm wondering how, it'd be interesting to see an organisation that's doing really well that has that kind of demographic.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is when you look at it's when you look at everybody that you've got, you look at your systems and processes, you look at the type of job functions that are there, you then look at the type of people that you're employing into those job functions. Not all, the stages of development. It's interesting because I did the personal values assessment on my son the other day. I used him as a guinea pig because at 16 I expected to see a much more energy down at the lower levels, and it was really quite interesting because it surprised me. There were quite a number of values that he was holding in the higher levels. It was as well as in the lower levels, and I think we're perhaps seeing there's a shift in because there's a shift in our generation's awareness, and when I say our generation, I'm making assumptions that we're all around about our sort of 40s to 50 range, and our own consciousness, our own awareness, and our own sort of desire for something more, I think is rippling out into our younger generations, and they're beginning to question, earlier what it is that they want. Earlier for them, they're looking for an experience. The economy has changed from, where you go and get a job and you know what the job is, because there's going to be many jobs out here that there aren't jobs for at the moment. People are learning subjects where there aren't any jobs for them right now, but there will be in the future. And so we've done what there's called a gig economy, paid by the project. And for young people, I think that's shifting their awareness and their consciousness about what it is they really want. So it really is all quite important to have the dialogue, of what is important to them, and not there's got to be a mix of satisfying the basic needs of the finances, the health and security for them, but also recognizing where else it is that maybe because we want to retain them rather than just let them go. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so that says, provided a reasonable level of salary is paid, i.e. the basic need is met, I find that people are more motivated by recognition, enjoyment, belonging and environment. So sorting these values is fundamental to getting good performance from a stable team. And yes, that I agree. That is the thing I was saying about we feel this. Culture is something that we feel. Whenever we go into an environment, we feel and sense something is going on, and that's why it's always been perceived as intangible, because we've been talking about emotions, we've been talking about emotional intelligence, and yet these things are the things that the values allow us to measure. By utilizing this tool, we can actually create measures now, performance improvements. And I link this very much with a 7-step process of looking at the environment, looking at the people working in the environment, looking at the systems and the processes, so a whole holistic approach to it, and then marrying it up through the engagement practices. And the engagement practices are about not just giving people subject matter information, but it's about actually helping them to have this dialogue around why do they see the world differently to somebody else, and what gets things stuck, why they get stuck, or why other people seem to be stuck, and how to take responsibility for our actions, our beliefs and our feelings. So yeah, cool.
Great then. So thanks for all of those questions. Are there any more questions? I see nothing in the chat box. Okay then, so I'm going to take that there are no more questions. So once again, everybody, I'd like to thank you for attending. I hope that you've found some value in this training today. And if you would like to discover more and explore how I use these tools with my clients to help them find more ways to be more productive and measure the performance improvements that they achieve through my 7-step process to productivity and engagement plan, then please do reach out, call me or ping me an email or visit my webpage, which is www.solutions-42.co.uk, and book a 45-minute free discovery call. There are also some useful audio and video interviews on my website under the connected page, one of which is with Richard Barrett, the founder himself, and the other is with Kathleen Seeley, both who've been my teachers, and both who speak on values and human potential in these interviews. If you would also like to unpack your personal values assessment in more detail, then please do ping me an email or alternatively message me, text me or call me, and I will happily provide a 30-minute complimentary coaching session. So that's it. I've had fun and hope you have too, and look forward to seeing you soon and to your success. Bye.